Do you want me to? Oh, what in the world? Oh, okay. Do you want me to get my husband to come watch?
If he's okay with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just come sit and listen. Come on, come join. Everybody, this is Cole.
Hey.
Hi, hubby.
Thank you guys for joining. So my topic is the benefits of deconstruction in the American Evangelical Church. Now, I realized after I'd already written the outline that it was an informative week and not persuasive. So I played with it a little bit, but it still sounds a little persuasive, so sorry. Martin Luther once said that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that really matter. Deconstruction is a really hot topic right now. And as popular Christian leaders condemn it left and right, denomination after denomination are seeing their numbers plummet as people begin to deconstruct their faith. So we're going to be looking a little bit at kind of like, why is this? What is deconstruction? And why are people leaving the faith? So the definition of deconstruction found on Google is a method of critical analysis of philosophical and literary language, which emphasizes the internal workings of language and conceptual systems, the relational quality of meaning, and the assumptions implicit in forms of expression. In terms of Christianity, this definition will probably shift to something like a method of critical analysis of philosophical, religious, cultural, and interpersonal ideals that shape the fundamental beliefs of an individual. Deconstruction is taking everything you were taught, your entire foundational and core beliefs, and questioning them to refine and define an individual's entire belief system. What is this? How does this relate to the church? Where did this sort of start that we can see? So it is likely that deconstruction has always existed. They say that the church as a whole, the global church, goes through every 200 years a period of reformation. And the date that we can look back to is the 16th century Reformation of Martin Luther and John Calvin. They led a deconstruction from Catholicism, creating Protestantism. And while this wasn't sudden or abrupt or anything like that, it had been brewing, it had been stirring for a while, Martin Luther's theological beliefs in the church erupted a new conversation about the authority of the Catholic Church and about their theological beliefs. His deconstruction and scholarship of his study was vital to providing a new foundational belief system. So we understand deconstruction, we get it, but we must remember that this is a very nuanced topic. Why is it so popular? Why are people just leaving? If they were taught according to scripture, shouldn't they be solid in their faith? And what does the political landscape have to do with evangelicalism? Living according to the gospel is to abandon self-serving politics. The gospel exists to serve us individually, but Jesus' greatest commandment was to love God and to love others. If we let our beliefs determine every inch of our politics, then our politics must demand that we love others within policy, not choosing policy to serve ourselves. The American political system is almost like an absolute like war within Jesus' teachings, because our landscape is designed to serve capitalism, the wealthy individual, and the corporation. Jesus taught that we must live our lives to serve others. That's the exact opposite. In fact, Jesus said at one point that it is easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than the rich man to get into heaven. So we see these odds at play. We see the difference. So why are people leaving? How does politics equate to the gospel? Well, this goes into the American church and it's binding with alt-right conservatism. And that's a seat of morally compromising values for millennials, Gen Zs, and overall younger generations. The difference between honor, discipline, and respect is outlined, but seems to be muddy often when parents are raising their children, especially young. Honor is to regard an individual with respect, to treat individuals as the creation they are. Discipline is to teach boundaries and the difference between right and wrong through grace, mercy, and kindness. Respect is to treat every individual with a level of understanding and regard. So how are we loving our neighbors when growing up we're taught that we're taught a multitude of things. I think most often we see now parents, racism is taught. We spank our kids and we discipline them with hitting. And this is not to get into like a parental debate or anything like that, but we do see this difference between we're taught to love others, and yet when our children do something wrong, they get hit or they get spanked or they get, verbally accosted or things like that. Additionally, it is said that, especially within the church, well, people are like, well, if deconstruction is this and deconstruction is that, and a part of deconstruction is looking into the internal and looking into what fundamental beliefs was I raised with, and that often in America leans to racism, leads to prejudice, leans to how am I treating other people who don't look like me. And something that is often taught and often reverberated, especially in Christian walls, is this idea of pulling ourselves up from our bootstraps and leaning into and just doing it the right way. Well, and the struggle with that is pulling ourselves up from our bootstraps comes from the idea that it is impossible to do well on your own. If you're literally in mud and you're trying to pull yourself up with your bootstraps, you can't do that. Your force of gravity doesn't do that. So you need somebody to come alongside you and help you get up and to get you out of the mud. So white people rush to give this advice to people of color, thinking that the playing field was leveled through civil rights and the abolition of outright slavery. And it's that statement just ignores, and just telling you to put in the work ignores the hardships and the history of colored people in America, as well as the current difficulties people face. So how does all of this connect? I'm saying a lot of things, and some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't make sense. But to the point, the survival of the American church is its death. Churches across the country are finding themselves at a crossroads. Either they defend these leaders who created this machine of things that serve them and that create policy that they believe is right, or they appeal to the younger generation and they allow their church to grow. Political identity here in our nation is wrapped up in this white evangelicalism that's created a beast. The younger generations as a whole are struggling to defend a system that has only ruined lives, made the class divide larger, and yet tells them that they aren't working hard enough, or doing enough, or creating enough, or believing enough, or praying hard enough. It tells them all these things and yet works on the back end to specifically make their lives harder. And honestly, deconstruction isn't the enemy of this. It is not the enemy of the gospel. It is the gospel. Jesus spoke about corporations versus the poor man, being the good Samaritan to the individual you despise, and welcoming the immigrant, loving every neighbor as though they are just like you. In order for the church to survive, we need to lean into these teachings. We need to question what we were taught, not because what we were taught was wrong, but to make sure that what we were taught and what we foundationally believe aligns with the gospel, aligns with the book that we say that we believe in and with the God we say we believe in. So, to pull it all together, the church is a very representation of God. It is the epitome of living a reformed life, and yet 2/3 of self-proclaimed Christians rather worship white supremacy than Christ. How do we steer the ship away from the things and bring us back to God? By listening, by being quiet and opening our hearts, by listening not to respond but to understand. Creating space for people to speak without feeling the need to correct them or to condemn them about what we think is right. And by examining the actual teachings of Jesus, sticking up for the poor, feeding and housing the immigrant, and caring for the sick. This is how we benefit the church. This is how deconstruction benefits the church. By being willing to listen more and to talk less, the church may live to preach another Sunday. Thank you. That's all.
Yay! That was so good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.